Now, I like the JoJos. I also like Yuji, but I also love fighting. And I want to see who would win here. Because today we're going to see a fight between the OGs against one of the biggest new age protagonists to do it. Our contenders are Jonathan Joestar and Joseph Joestar, and they will be fighting against Yuji individually. Not at the same time, but we're looking at the both of them. I am down to have Yuji fight with a partner against some JoJo characters or someone in general, but that's up to y'all on who that would be. But before we can determine the outcome of these matchups, we need to thoroughly examine each character's capabilities. So let's begin with Yuji Itadori. Now, Yuji's abilities have grown tremendously over the course of his journey. In his base, prior to the awakening form that we know now, Yuji already had an impressive amount of physical prowess. But to truly appreciate Yuji currently, you have to acknowledge Sukuna, as all of his feats are based on that fight, which is also acknowledging Gojo. Great. So, okay, how strong would Yuji be? We're gonna start this off with Gojo Satoru, widely regarded as the strongest sorcerer of the modern era. After getting out of that Kenjaku jail, he had found that nowadays he had started to scale around large town level physically. And you know, with his curse techniques like Red, he would be able to reach certain things like Small City, and his Hollow Purple could go even beyond that. And Sukuna is comparable to Gojo in these many aspects. His attack potency should be around the same at Large Town, and reaching Small City level with his Divine Flame and or Malevolent Shrine. And this had been based on how much damage had they been capable of doing this time versus the original area of Shibuya for Sukuna and Gojo before that too, which they had both done so much damage previously. So there's only going up in this specific fight. Now let's consider Yuji's abilities in relation to them. Now post-awakening is what I'm going to be calling it. Yuji's strength had to have reached at least small town level, possibly large town, because we have seen Yuji be able to damage and weaken Sukuna with his punches. Now granted, we did have a binding vow, which had been able to cause the soul disruption, which had been due to, you know, Sukuna inhabiting Megami's body, and it's not his own. But, you know, given Sukuna's durability, that still counts. You know, he should be on par on what he's capable of in terms of strength, and this should give weight into the idea of what Yuji should be capable of. Now, beyond raw physical abilities, Yuji had developed a couple of other techniques that make him an interesting fighter, and they will have reason and weight in the fight. For those unfamiliar, he had mastered the Black Flash, which is a technique that amplifies your attack power by 2.5 times. He's also developed blood manipulation abilities, allowing him to burst his blood on opponents and causing explosions, similar to Chozo, his brother's supernova technique. He had also awakened Shrine, a modified version of Sukuna's curse technique, and it creates cutting effects through physical contact, which its default attack being Dismantle. Now, while currently limited in its output, Yuji still had enhanced its soul separating ability with that binding vow that we had mentioned earlier. Next, we have Yuji's domain expansion, and it did far expand above buildings with this wide diameter, but at the same time, sorcerers do have the ability to expand their domain expansion pretty wide in general, but they're not exactly sure on, like, well, they are. It's just like effectivity is a huge thing, and this is the first and last time that you'll see Yuji go about this. So it's like, okay, did it have to be this big? Not necessarily. It could have been probably more potent in a more condensed area, but that's not really the point exactly here. Now, as for its potency, right, it's likely similar to his base attack potency. So again, you know, at least small town level. As for what it does, I think it falls in line to, you know, how Malevolent Shrine, you know, it's like a sure hit, right? This is a dismantle. It's a for sure hit using dismantle, but instead of the person, it's rendering the soul. The only time it's used is against Sukuna, who is this sort of curse now. He's originally a sorcerer, but he's a curse now. And it worked on him for sure. But my thing is, in this video, we're gonna do with the application of like, it also works on people too, because realistically speaking, why wouldn't it? You know, like it'd be odd if it wouldn't be able to do that. It's his domain expansion. He's also gained low to mid-level regeneration. He's allowed to heal from severe wounds that would normally disable and disfigure him. His stamina is superhuman, comparable to Sukuna's ability to fight without exhaustion. So with all things considered, he's definitely largely agreed upon that he's the definitive top 10 strongest character in Jujutsu Kaisen. But the placing is really up for interpretation, as there are some really strong characters around him. Now that we've covered Yuji's strengths and facilities, well, what do we have in the Joestar department? Now, going up first, we have Jonathan Joestar. After his training with Zeppeli, he had been capable of great strength, but it's not likely enough to contend with Yuji currently. See, I had a different video on JoJo scaling entirely, and Jonathan Joestar had defeated Tarkus, who had split a cliff with pure strength. But the thing is, we haven't had much better feats besides defeating Dio, and there's a lot of different characters when you're getting into stands too. And that cliff splitting feat didn't really amount to as much as what it looked like. Being strong enough to destroy a building is what happened. His durability would be around the same too, but here's the thing, right? I have to look into Phantom Blood again just to make sure that I'm not missing anything for videos like this. And I'm not sure when or if I've approached the Tarkus destroying this large mass of bedrock before, so I calced it again to be sure. And this changes up pretty much everything in terms of being able to fight well, because Tarkus pulverized this estimated 4,140 ton bedrock boulder with just one finger. We were going about the whole volume and width, and you get the idea. Now, the energy required for this feat had been calculated to be around 103 gigajoules, which is the equivalent of 24 tons of TNT. That's with a single finger. Now, if we conservatively estimate that a finger represents like a tenth of his Tarkus strength, his full body power could be around 10 times that, which would be 247 tons as a TNT equivalent. This would put Tarkus in the multi-city block level of power. Jonathan, having defeated Tarkus and later matching with Dio in combat, should be considered even stronger than that. And we can reasonably estimate that Jonathan's strength and durability to be at the higher end of that, of multi-city block level, especially considering that Jonathan had been given the rest of Zeppeli's Hamon. You have an argument that Jonathan at the end of Phantom Blood, not dying, is touching small town level, at least, right? Now, when it comes to speed, Jonathan operates at a whole different level of speed. Because while JJK characters have feats that are amounting to essentially supersonic plus, and maybe a bit above that, we have Jonathan reacting and fighting Dio, who had been fighting at massively faster than light speed. We've seen Jonathan able to react to Dio's attacks, and this is the same Dio that had done well against stands later. So that's a huge thing. Well, after this, does he have Hamon stuff that helps against this fight with Yuji? This one requires metal, this one requires water. He wouldn't do the mind control thing. Okay, no. On to Joseph. Now, Joseph Joestar had been appreciated by the masses and interpreted as the more skillful and smarter combat master compared, while Jonathan is supposed to be the Brawn who maxes out, Joseph is the Goku, while Jonathan had been Broly, respectively. But strength-wise, Joseph actually clocks in at a similar level to Jonathan, both operating at the higher end of multi-city block level. Now, Joseph's ultimate Hamon overdrive should push this power even further, because when it used this technique against the Pillarmen, who had recognized to be stronger than Dio for sure, it is very likely that he had boosted his attack potency all the way over to the lower end of small town level, but this is a singular attack. Now, speed-wise, Joseph Joestar should also be around a similar speed or greater because he had dealt with the Pillarmen. But the feat is usually based on the Redstone of Asia and being able to react to this type of thing. He had also reacted to the Space Reaper Stingy Eyes from Straight Up, but that's a whole thing. Now, what sets Joseph apart from Jonathan is his genius level battle intelligence. He excels at analyzing his opponents, predicting their actions, creating strategies on the fly. Now, also being able to outsmart the Pillarmen, who are strategic geniuses in themselves that have been present for historical battle movements like Sun Tzu and his Art of War, is a huge point on his tactical prowess because he's just some kid. And he did that. We have speed, we have intelligence, we have the ultimate Hamon overdrive specifically. Now let's say that we have not exactly on par levels of strength, but Joseph won't die immediately. What can we assess from these two about that, though? Well, to get to Joseph versus Yuji, we have to get through Jonathan versus Yuji, remember? Now that we've assessed Jonathan's capabilities, this matchup becomes more interesting. Now, Jonathan's strength and durability at the higher end of multi-city block level, potentially touching small town level if we're being really nice to him, puts him closer to Yuji than we initially thought. In terms of raw power, Yuji still has the edge. His post-awakening abilities put him at small town level, possibly larger than that, and he's definitely got the strength part here, unfortunately. And speed is where Jonathan really shines. Now, this could allow Jonathan to land like multiple strikes before Yuji can react. That's really about it. The fight would most likely start with Jonathan, trying to end it quickly. Oh, I'm going to get in there and wipe the floor with this kid, using his speed advantage to the best of his abilities, but Yuji's durability and regeneration would let him withstand this initial assault. He'd definitely feel it, but he'll live for sure. Now, Yuji's trump card here are his abilities in mind, as a Black Flash could catch Jonathan off guard entirely and change the approach to the fight. He also has his blood manipulation technique still and Shrine, but blood as a liquid is still easier to work with as Jonathan's Hamon will work, especially working better with the amount of oxygen in the blood. Plus, Jonathan has already dealt with Dio Space River Stingy Eyes, which are faster. As for Yuji's Shrine, that and let's say a Binding Vow if he really wanted to do it, he could easily just ruin Jonathan and his fighting ability. But this depends on Yuji's ability to assess what Hamon is and how it functions. And an unfortunate thing for Jonathan, this domain and its critical sure hit effect is completely unfortunate because Yuji's dismantle technique can just rend souls. Like, that's stupid. Like, that's dumb compared to what he's got. This gives a severe threat to Jonathan that goes beyond physical damage because he has nothing for it. Hamon, while powerful, isn't used for protecting your soul. Just hasn't been doing that. It never happened. Now, Jonathan also has no experience defending against attacks that can target his soul directly. And his speed might help him avoid some attacks, yeah, sure. But the nature of the domain expansion's sure hit effect means that he can't evade everything. And his best chance would be to disrupt the domain before it fully forms, using his superior speed. But he's most likely going to be able to do so. As for Yuji's ability to recognize Hamon, he's already shown great adaptability throughout his fights in Jujutsu Kaisen. He's faced a wide variety of curse techniques and has quickly learned to counter or mitigate their effects. And when it comes to Hamon, Yuji might be initially caught off guard, a little bit confused, but his combat instincts would kick in very fast. He's gonna look and just be like, oh man, this guy is breathing, and every time he hits me, it hurts really extra and it's really tingly. And he could just adjust his fighting style to minimize these direct hits. Now, Yuji's experience with energy-based techniques might also help him just use his intuition on these abilities of Hamon and allowing him to develop some sort of countermeasure on the fly. He's got superhuman stamina. He has this regeneration, and he can get like his hand cut off and it just be fine. He's going to be way better in a longer fight. And Jonathan's endurance, it's going to be from his Hamon breathing as opposed to like Yuji and just like, I don't know, it's either him or Sukuna juices or all that. And this is going to be difficult. Like, he will be able to fight through certain injuries, but Yuji can heal actual damage. And Jonathan's Hamon will just have him repaired enough to continue to function, but it should be stunting him still because, oh man, I'm still having to breathe, control my breathing, doing this. And this will affect his ability to continue the fight versus Yuji, who's just going and going and going, and it's ridiculous. And this is with the idea that Yuji is respecting him and not busting out the domain expansion immediately. Like, he's like, oh, okay, you want this to be a war of attrition? All right, we can do this. Let's make it a war of attrition. And that will just give Yuji the edge also. He wins on like both merits, so the verdict, it's probably Yuji. As for Joseph Joestar versus Yuji, you still have his predictive capabilities, resourcefulness, psychological warfare, misdirection, quick learning, all that. Yuji is more instinctual based, had a great analytical ability, rapid skill development, resilience, like out the wazoo. But in a longer battle, Joseph might initially have the upper hand, by setting him up, predicting, all that. And he could figure out the nature of cursed energy eventually and how it relates to Yuji's abilities faster than Yuji could understand the concept of Hamon. But Yuji's adaptability means that he wouldn't fall for the same trick twice if he can do anything about it. And as for how the fight progresses, he'd likely start to see through at least some of Joseph's strategies as they develop, and he's going to start countering something. How I think it goes, it's a battle of Joseph learning and getting to the point where he will use his ultimate Hamon Overdrive, or he has to do something to stunt Yuji's mind entirely, against Yuji seeing what is it going to take to defeat this guy, you know, before getting to the point of using his domain expansion. Like, because if he really has to do it, then I guess he would just be able to do it. I think Joseph would have to try to find more innovative ways to use Hamon that he's probably never considered before to get to the point of using this ultimate attack, because no one has had hands like Yuji. Like, come on, it's not happened. And Yuji, he might get lost as to what exactly is this Joseph guy's plan. Because the real case here is that, you know, Yuji defeated Sukuna, and he did beat him with a collective of others. But Joseph beat the Pillarmen. And he beat them with what he's learned from others instead, rather than just like having them all accessible to him. And these two things to me are largely different on how these characters can execute. And I think it's wild to some people in general, but I do think this is a point to be made. Like, if Joseph was a freaking sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen, and he has his intelligence currently, like everything that he's developed, then man, he probably would have solved this Sukuna stuff a lot faster than the people we had on there. And I'm saying this as someone who's caught up on both franchises. Most series don't have someone as smart as Joseph Joestar. And he is a goofball, and he does look stupid a lot of the time. And I wouldn't trust him with anything. But the one thing I give to that guy is, damn, he knows how to close it out. And that's what makes these two largely different. So the verdict, it should go to Joseph before the domain comes out. If Yuji had done this domain stuff earlier, then Yuji just wins easily. Just remove all the whole thoughts of like, oh, intelligence this and da-da-da that. Domain expansion answers the call. It will close out faster than anything else if he had been allowed to do so. But that's with the idea that Yuji won't immediately do it because, you know, he likes scrapping. To me, that's a very fair observation, but granted, that's because I'm the one that's talking. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.